No matter what you're doing in your life, no matter what conflict you have, dialogue is the only thing that will get you through it. We've gotten to the point that we actually think that talking about race is racism. What we want to talk about today is, why is this uncomfortable? I know talking about things that are uncomfortable is uncomfortable, but why is this uncomfortable? Why are we afraid to talk to each other about the differences in our cultures? Why isn't that a beautiful question? We're never going to have or be able to have deep conversations about the real root and the history and the pain if we don't first learn how to just have civil discourse.
This is Nancy Gill, by the way, who has started Ambition and brought together all of these amazing people here. So these are conversations, unfortunately, that we're having a little late. And we need to get past these issues because I'm proud to be Black and who I am, but I love being acknowledged as a human being. I think everybody loves to be acknowledged as a human being and wants to be treated as one. So, to have these conversations, yes, it should be easier than what we're really dealing with it as. And we're sitting here talking about white and Black. So I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation, have this event, and bring us all together so that we can get past this conversation and start getting into the future of where we need to go as a humanity.
Back to what Nancy was saying, why is it so uncomfortable, right? This is the question. And for me, I would say when I do have these conversations with people who are white or who are non-Black, for me it's uncomfortable because if I'm having a conversation with them, most of the times I like these people and I don't want to offend them. So you have to, I think almost as Americans, we're trained to kind of babysit people's feelings.
I feel like the conversations are easy to have when you're thinking of it from an on-paper perspective, right? Like, oh, I have a question, I'm going to ask it, and I'll receive an answer. If I'm not being disrespectful, if I'm really coming from a place of trying to understand, it would be fine. But there's also this, like, you should know better complex that comes into play when you're trying to have these conversations. And, that's across ages, across races, across cultures. There's always this, well, why don't you just know that kind of mindset that I feel like a lot of Americans have. You should just know. You should know. But there are a lot of things that we don't know. And me even being a Black person, that my experience as a Black woman is different from your experience as a Black woman or yours. And it's not the same. There is this kind of thing in the air that suggests that all Black people are living one reality, one life, and that's not the case. We're all human beings, we're all people, and we would like to be acknowledged in that manner. So I think the conversation gets uncomfortable when it starts to feel like we're being jumbled and piled into a category like cats.
One of the things that I know is tough right now, there are so many different feelings out there. And that's what happens. If you ask questions, then you're afraid of being accused of not knowing, and why don't you know? But the truth is, right, we're in LA, and there are so many areas and pockets, right, that are so insular. So if you are, by 7, right, we've sort of figured out what we think in this world, and it's what our parents think. And then our parents might tell us, well, we're not racist. We have 6 Black friends, and you get along with everyone, right? And so then you now, as a 7, 8, 12-year-old, you don't know how to process that differently. You've been told by your parents you're not racist. You have Black friends, and that proves your point. And so I think that's what I think we're struggling with so much, is when someone's so hell-bent on you should know, I think that's the part we have to figure out.
So growing up in the middle of Los Angeles and going to private, predominantly white, all-girls schools, and also kind of the same, but co-ed, it's been really tough to have these conversations in the past because, in my experience, no one who is, white wants to say that they have privilege. No one wants to actually admit that they are privileged, And so it's really tough to have these types of conversations when no one wants to admit that.
So I also went to a similar, predominantly white high school. And I think we didn't really have that conversation that needs to be had about just like privilege and stuff, and like not being around many people that had different experiences than me. Like I feel like, well, if I was around more people like that, I would have like a better understanding of other people.
I've got all kinds of friends, and I've never had a white friend of mine say anything like that. Like, you have to acknowledge your privilege and understand it. Yeah. How did you come to that?
Well, just talking about like the problem, like acknowledging the problem of like the lack of diversity, and coming to that acknowledgement that we are privileged. I think being in Los Angeles and seeing how diverse it is as like a city, it wasn't represented in the high school I went to. Mm-hmm. There wasn't like the representative diversity. So after high school, after I graduated, I kind of like going out in Los Angeles and like just seeing the diversity there. I just knew that it wasn't represented in my high school.
What you said was really important, because when I think of, America and the United States, it's about being comfortable. It's about having everything that you want, and to speak up and say, hey, something's not right, and I see something that doesn't fit with the rest of the world, and to speak up on that uncomfortable part says a lot. That you recognize that and you see that and you're like, hey, because everybody else may not speak about it because they're comfortable, and it is not easy to speak up and say that, hey, this is not how it should be. And the fact that you could identify that and see that is amazing.
I love it that you're here, Helena, especially because she's been starting to have these conversations, but with all her white friends. And that's great. We want to talk and without like preaching the choir. But when we talked about this, I said, like, well, you could actually have that conversation with this amazing diverse group. For all of us on every side of the table, right? All owning our side of the street. Why are we so afraid to say, let's just start now? It's been effed up till now. And obviously, again, right, there's so many layers. There's so much to understand about history. These conversations, right, again, if they can get us more and more comfortable, then we're getting somewhere. And we have to be patient, right? It's not going to be fixed tomorrow.
When I meet white people who like me, I'm like, okay, well, then this is cool. Y'all are cool. We can rock together. But it's not what you're taught. It's not what you're raised to believe. It's like, be careful, walk on eggshells, say what you can, speak when you're spoken to, don't make yourself too noticed and call it a day. But I can appreciate that, what you both said about diversity. Not a lot of diversity there, not a lot of diversity here. So how are we supposed to know anything about each other?
I feel like I was blessed more so growing up because my parents, they placed me in acting. I still am, book me. But so because of that environment, I was able to go out more so and meet new people. Like, I've made friends on different sets. I've been invited over to their houses in the hills, big fancy houses, and pure white family. And I get to interact, and I get to speak to, and I get to understand that culture, and it's different from what I was growing up and raised around based on my environment. So because of that, I feel like it's easier to have those conversations. Like, I don't have to code switch more so with those friends of mine because I've already had the conversation with them. We've spoken about it. They understand and value my opinion.
And I think that is why talking about the history is so uncomfortable, because you come to this point in your mind where you're like, I really don't feel that way. I really don't identify with the way this country came to be. I really don't identify with the practices that were in place, literally just to keep a certain group of people down at all times. It's systematic, and it continues to be.
It is a new time. There's a quote that somebody said I heard the other day, and I think it really reflects all of us, is that our generation is here to answer our ancestors' prayers. And so the power is in the people. And you see people marching, you see people want change, and you see that people want a better world. There's nothing that we cannot do when we're all united. But if we're fighting the battle alone, then it's a battle that's going to be lost. We have to as kings and queens, unite the people together so that we can rise as an empire.
History makes us hate white people. Like, well, it made me hate white people. And my grandma is white and Polish. We do need to educate ourselves about it, though. We do. So it's like finding that balance.
I think the real conversation is about the future and not about history. And how we're going to go forward, because the history is so painful. Like he said, it makes you hate. It makes you turn into a hateful person because of the hate that's been brought on to us, you know? I think we need to envision a future where we all fit in. That's what we should be talking about, is how we're going to not repeat the past and how we're going to go forward with an inclusive future. I think is what we want to talk about, what kind of future we want to see. You know, what we want to talk about, what we don't want to see, and what we want to carry on, and make sure that we're carrying on, habits that break the ties of the pain and everything that we've been through, that we acknowledge. At the same time, we don't forget the past, but we acknowledge what happened, but we start building ways of something that's more inclusive for all of us.
So, I'm white and black. From my white side is on the total hick Appalachian Mountain. Y'all know where you should be at. And then my black side is on the other side where we got a little hood in us. Nothing is gonna change here at all unless there's a heart change. Because if we're forced to change, there's no change, because we're not changed here. It's about bringing that future together. It's not about like, you need to feel everything that we feel, because there's no way that you could feel everything that we feel. You have to have those conversations like you were saying, where it's like, hey, where can we find some common ground where I can trust your feelings towards me and vice versa? Like when I say something to you, you want to hear it instead of defend it. It's the hardest conversation that we're ever going to have, right? For everyone to fully understand it. But the cool thing about this is, we have information now, and we are smart enough to make those conversations. If we get to that point where it's like, what should we do for the greater good? Then I think that's when we're really gonna make some change.
We have to just be okay with taking baby steps. I think doing this repeatedly, it'll be fascinating in a year to see the depth that we can go, and the curiosity people have.
Sometimes it's like you have to just have these and start these conversations and make the comfortable people uncomfortable in order to like actually, create change.
That's the perfect way to end this. I'm really glad you guys are all here. Thank you.